Welcome, everybody. Nice to have you joining us today. My name is Brenda Hawes, and I work here at Reliant Behavioral Health as a clinical manager and workplace consultant. And today we're going to be talking about the ups and downs of life, kind of a catch-all category with assertiveness, self-esteem, difficult people dealing with feelings, and making your job fun. Who could complain about that? A couple of housekeeping issues today. Initially, we will be sending a copy of the PowerPoint to everybody that's registered, so you'll get that. Also, all of our recorded webinars are posted on our website, myrbh.com, and on our YouTube channel as well. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, a lot of times when people talk about assertiveness, they think assertiveness is about, that the reason to be assertive is so that we can express ourselves and we can get what we want. And actually, the whole reason to be assertive is so that we can communicate clearly our needs and our feelings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we always get what we want. And it's definitely not a nice way to be angry, and it's not about being subtle or manipulative. The more we can express our truth honestly, articulately, and clearly and in a respectful way, we may or may not get what we want or need, but we're not stuffing those things inside, because sometimes when we stuff our feelings inside, they come out sideways. And then that can take a toll on our relationships, on our physical, mental, emotional, relational health. So let's talk about what assertiveness is. And I'm just going to read the description because I think it's a nice overall description. It's a style of communication and or a pattern of behavior that promotes equality in human relationships, enabling us to act in our own best interests, to stand up for ourselves without undue anxiety, to express feelings honestly and comfortably, and to exercise personal rights without denying the rights of others. So that's a great big long description that says it pretty succinctly, and now let's break it down a little bit as we move into our next slide. It's really about making sure that our needs, interests, and feelings are known in a way that gets not only our needs met, but it does it in a way that we're respecting others. Because the way I think about assertiveness is kind of like the golden rule, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. We're treating people in the way that we want to be treated as well. And so there's definitely some ways that we go about doing that, and let's discuss that next too. There are definitely some roadblocks to being assertive and expressing ourselves in assertive ways. A lot of times it has to do with our conditioning and programming. We learn early on a common message that you sometimes hear with little kids, maybe that they've heard from their parents early on, is children are meant to be seen and not heard, or sometimes children will speak up their feelings, and the parent says, no, we don't say mean things like that, or, you know, you're not supposed to be saying those kinds of things. And so early on, we learn not to express ourselves, and that probably is one of the most significant roadblocks to being assertive. A lot of times it's just our own lack of awareness. We're just not aware sometimes of what we want and what we need, and oftentimes in relationships it's really all about speaking up and, first of all, identifying what is it that I want and need. Fear and anxiety are oftentimes huge contributors to what gets in the way of being assertive. Fear of what other people might think, fear of retaliation, fear that somebody might get angry or upset with us. And sometimes we just lack the communication skills. There's just some basic how-tos with assertiveness that can be really helpful, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So as we're becoming more assertive, what really helps is to take an inventory. And this is really true for any kind of behavior or any style of relating or behaving, or any time we want to make a change in the way we're doing things, is to take time out to self-reflect, to tune in, to become more aware of ourselves and the way we operate. Because as I was mentioning a minute ago, so often we operate because of our early mental formations, those early belief systems that now drive behavior. And the ways that we become more aware of those things are to become reflective, introspective, tune in, contemplate. All those things help us take inventory. The other thing that's really important is prioritizing. What's most important? What do I really want to say? What do I want to communicate? And looking at that is sort of a place to start. And so certainly our self-esteem impacts. Our self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves and how confidently we feel about expressing and sharing the truth of who we are. And a lot of times it involves having good, positive self-talk. So if in doing an inventory, you've noticed that you have a lot of negative self-judgments, judgments about self or other, that's a time to kind of tune in and challenge some of those belief systems. As we become more assertive, that taking that realistic assessment of the risk, because a lot of times we might initially feel scared or anxious or afraid, and that fear sometimes comes from a misperception of what's going on. So we have to really assess the situation. And a lot of times those early kind of the thoughts, feelings, belief systems that we develop early on about when it's safe and when it's not safe to be assertive can get in the way. So doing an overall assessment of it is really helpful. But also looking at what's our support network like, and how do we speak up in a way that the risk feels manageable and like something that I can navigate. The truth of it is that sometimes it just takes courage. It just means taking the courage to stand up, speak up, say what you think and feel, speaking your truth honestly, and taking those risks. Because the other truth about it is the more we do it, the more we build the muscle to be able to do it. So once we sort of dip our toe in and find out we can do it, the more we're able to do it. It's sort of like how little children develop self-esteem. They take an initial step, say maybe they're learning to crawl, and they crawl and they get lots of kudos and support from a parent figure or a guardian, and then they go, oh, wow, yeah, I did that. And then they have the confidence to then take on the next big step, which might mean getting up on hands and knees and then crawling around a coffee table or a chair, and then, oh, wow, I'm able to do that, yay. Okay, now I'll be able to take on the next big step. That's really how it is that we develop self-esteem. Self-esteem isn't just something that we automatically have. We develop it over time, and the way we develop it is just by taking some of those risks and having the courage to step out there. And then also, as you're doing that, remembering as you're speaking up, you're respecting yourself and you're respecting others. You're respecting yourself enough to say, I am going to share with others what I think and feel, and I'm going to be honest and let other people know that as well, and be willing to hear what they have to say in the process. You know, there are a number of things that sometimes we can do that hold ourselves back from stepping out and being assertive. One of them is we worry about the approval of others. We worry that they're going to feel judged or criticized by us. Sometimes people have a lot of difficulty taking responsibility for their own feelings or beliefs, what they want to put out there, and that can get in the way also, because when people don't take responsibility for what's going on in themselves, then there's that tendency to blame or hold other people accountable. And truly the only way we can really change our behavior or to evaluate, to look at doing things differently, is to tune in and take responsibility for our part in any kind of dynamic that we might be involved in. So let's talk next about how we can communicate more clearly. First and foremost, it's really about being aware of our body language. So much of the time, much of our communication is communicated not through the words that we use, but through our body language. And so as we were talking earlier about contemplating, tuning in, paying attention, it's really tuning into your body language along the way. I'm going to back up because I think I've skipped one here. Yeah. So it's also being direct. It's avoiding excuses. Sometimes we really have to be able to separate our own behavior from what other people are saying, and don't take things personally. Oftentimes that what is the thing that can most get in the way for people is when we take things personally, because when we take things personally, we feel judged. We either judge ourselves or we judge others. You know, I think I'm going to go back one slide because I did skip ahead. I apologize. I'm learning about using my mouse. Hang on one second. Okay, so going back to the initial part of communicating more effectively. Basically, it's knowing what you want to say. It's getting really, really clear about what you want to say sometimes before you put the words out there. You don't have to ask people for permission to talk, think, or behave. You don't need somebody's permission to communicate what you want to say to them. And it really, we were talking a minute ago about body language and being aware of your body language. Making eye contact is really a key to connecting and having someone feel connected with you. It can really level the playing field and help people feel at ease and more comfortable. And also just looking at, is there a way to cut out unnecessary comments, and is there a way to slow down? If you look at just in terms of people from other cultures or even different parts of the country, some people speak really slowly and some people speak really fast, and they get their words in, and they combine a lot of words in a very short period of time. So sometimes slowing down, really looking at your pace, that can really be helpful. That's sort of like part of as you tune into, as we were talking about body language, that's part of this as well. Okay, I'm having a little trouble with my mouse, so excuse me, folks. All righty. So we were talking about body language already, being direct, not take things personally. A lot of times people, when they're learning to be assertive or being more assertive, they'll preface things by putting themselves down, and you don't have to do that. And the last one, kind of that little message, if at first you don't succeed, keep trying, keep at it. You know, it's practice, practice, practice. That's really what it's all about, developing that muscle. And you don't have to get it perfect. It's about having that courage and just putting it out there in the first place. So some general guidelines. Demonstrate respect. What is it that we all want when we're in a communication, when we're in a relationship with someone? I hear this more often than anything else. When there's a conflict in the workplace or a conflict between two or more people, people will often say, I don't feel respected. I don't feel like what I have to say is being respected. We talked about already taking responsibility for what's your part in any given dynamic and exchange. Keeping an open mind. I mean, this is one of the things that is the greatest gift that we can give each other, letting go of preconceived ideas, preconceived notions, preconceived conceptualizations of things, because the truth about it is that we only know what we know to date based on what we've learned and maybe how we've been conditioned and programmed. As we open our minds, we can then consider new possibilities, and oftentimes when we're in communication with someone else and two or more people are gathered together and can share in an open way, it can really allow creativity to flow and ideas and understandings to come out of it that otherwise might not have been discovered. Listening constructively. The greatest gift we can all give one another is the gift of listening. And listening is a skill. We develop the skill. We don't automatically learn how to do it. Oftentimes people listen in order to be able to talk, when really listening is about listening to understand and listening to really hear what somebody has to say, rather than I'm listening because I want to think about how I'm going to respond to you. It's really helpful when we can question people, when somebody's putting something out there. What do you mean by that? Or what did you say? Or, boy, I'm not really sure what that meant. Or when we ask open-ended questions, it shows we're engaged, it shows we're interested, it shows we want to hear more about what someone has to say. And if we're going to offer up any criticism can be a helpful kind of a thing when we look at it as constructive criticism, and what we're criticizing and what we're giving constructive feedback about is people's ideas, not people. So you often hear that with parents when their children, with their young children or their children in general. I love you. I don't like the behavior that you were just engaging in. So a little bit more about self-esteem. As I was mentioning earlier, self-esteem is really something that we learn and we develop over time. It's something that we can take responsibility for ourselves, but we can also really support the self-esteem of others. And how we do that is by acknowledging, by appreciating, by really letting someone know when they've done something that we see and appreciate, because what people most need and want is to know that they're seen, that they're understood. And for people that are having a rough time, what they often need is they need to know someone's listening, someone understands, and that there's resources that are out there that can assist them. One thing to think about with self-esteem is that it can fluctuate depending on the environments that we're in and the people that we're in association with. Maybe somebody feels really confident and has a high self-esteem with a coworker, but then when a manager or a supervisor or a boss or somebody that's in an authority position, they may feel a little more intimidated, and it may be a little more difficult to be assertive in those kinds of situations. So keeping that in mind too, and so sometimes if there are people that you really feel confident with as you're expressing yourself, and you notice I have good self-esteem, maybe in those situations you've got something to learn from. What helps me in those situations be comfortable that I can bring to bear in those situations when I feel less comfortable with maybe someone who's in an authority position. So how do we become aware of our feelings? We tend to live in a culture, in Western culture, that really doesn't honor and pay attention to feelings in the way that some cultures do. I think one in particular that we don't do a very good job of honoring in our Western culture is grief and loss. So oftentimes people go through a grief process and end up thinking that they're depressed when really what they're feeling is grief and loss. So one of the ways that we can best tune in to how we're feeling is by tuning into ourselves and asking, what am I feeling right now? And oftentimes people will do that and they don't know. And in those cases, the body's the place to go. The body doesn't lie. The body is a great resource for helping us tune into how we're feeling, because a lot of times the body is the first thing that lets us know that something's going on. So that might be a pit in the stomach, it might be clenched fist, it might be this gurgling, it may be heavy breathing, might be the tightness that one might feel in their muscles. So tuning into the body, asking some questions, because when we ask ourselves questions, the nature of mind is it doesn't like to sit with not knowing. It wants to fill in the blanks. So when we ask ourselves questions, the mind kind of percolates on it, and eventually it will come up with some kind of an answer. And then we can kind of contemplate, does this fit or does this not fit? So it might be asking, what am I feeling? Then it might mean, why am I feeling this way? What's this all about? Am I being triggered right now? Is there something that's getting stirred up in me that's really calling for attention and asking for attention? What I noticed for myself in my own life is that when I'm having a really strong emotional reaction, that is usually an indicator for me that something's going on. I'm feeling something, I'm getting triggered, there's something that's going on that I need to be paying attention to. And a lot of times when we notice ourselves getting the most intensely triggered or emotionally reactive, it's because something from our past has sort of been brought up, and something from the past is getting connected with something that's going on in present time. So we have past, current, present time that have gotten kind of melded together. So sometimes we have to sort some of that out. Part of the process in becoming aware of our feelings is also to really look at our options. What are my choices here? What are the things that I can do? And then also, what's the best option? So sometimes it's taking a minute to really self-reflect to see what's going to work best for each of us. Excuse me. And then, of course, one of the things that always happens is that there are times when we're going to be dealing with other people's negative reactions. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard that saying, we can please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. And it may be that you're going to be having an interaction with somebody who's just having a bad day. and or they're hearing what you're saying in a way that isn't accurate with what it is that you're trying to communicate. So sometimes they just may not be able to relate. They may not be able to understand, and they may be having some irrational thinking related to what you're having to say. If somebody does have some constructive criticism, and it's valid, it doesn't need to destroy you. It can be an opportunity for learning. I mean, the truth about it is that when we're open to other people's constructive feedback, and I think I like to call it constructive feedback as opposed to criticism, because criticism kind of has a little bit of a negative connotation, but it does become an opportunity for us to learn and grow, because we all have blind spots. We all have things about our behavior and the way we relate to people in the world that maybe aren't as effective as they could be. And that's okay. It becomes an opportunity to learn. All righty, so our next slide. Another thing is maybe you do goof up sometimes. That's okay too. Doesn't mean you're a loser, doesn't mean that you would move into your self-judgment. We all make mistakes. It's not whether or not we're going to make them or not make them. It's about how do we respond when we do. And there's a tendency, I would say that many people want to be liked, they want to be approved of, and they want to feel like they're good enough. And so sometimes when people are responding in a negative way, when we're feeling judged and criticized, it pushes some of those buttons. All righty? And everybody's going to judge differently. Like, you might do something and one person is going to have one response to it, be open, flexible, hey, love the feedback, consider what you have to say. Somebody else maybe is going to have a negative reaction. It's just two different people responding in different ways. Another thing that can happen is we can feel uncomfortable with that. But remember, like anything, anytime we're feeling on the spot, anytime we're feeling some difficult feelings, this too shall pass. So how do you sit with it? How do you allow it? How do you allow the learning that wants to bring you? And remember that it's you know, if somebody's disapproving or unhappy in a certain situation, it's temporary. It's not going to have to be there over a long period of time. And also, if somebody's really critical or feeling critical or judgmental, it may be that person isn't just a bad person. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe that's their tendency. Some people do tend to be more critical thinkers. They're more analyzers. They're more quick to offer constructive criticism and or kind of be critical in their thinking in the way they respond. It doesn't mean that we have to be reacting to that in a negative way. You know, one of the things that happens a lot in the workplace and when we're with kids or our families or our friends is how do we support the self-esteem in other people? How do we really reinforce that and encourage it? First and foremost, we know this with little kids, is to just recognize the importance of it. And the second is to practice seeing positives in others. I worked as a counselor at a camp for exceptional children the end of my freshman year in college, and the focus of the camp was to ignore all negative behavior and only reinforce positive behavior. And it was amazing to me how by the end of that summer it really changed my life in terms of kind of a philosophy of life, which was really when we start looking for the positives in people, we see them. It's all in the field. If we look for it, we're going to see it. And when we do see it, speak to it, acknowledge it, affirm it. And sometimes even with our closest of friends or our family, our intimate spouses, partners, we sort of take some of these things for granted. But the truth is, we all like to hear it. We all like to be affirmed. We like to be noticed and acknowledged. And there's always plenty of things that we can acknowledge and affirm people for. People don't tend to like a lot of advice and criticism. More what they want is they want you to be a good listener. They want you to listen to what they're saying, ask questions, show that you understand, and tune in. All right? And part of it is really being willing to look at another person's perspective. Maybe you see things differently, but are you willing to consider what someone has to say? And a prime way to be able to do that is by asking clarifying questions, but also, what do you mean by that? Help me understand more. Those can be really helpful ways to help people feel like you really want to hear what they have to say and to tune in. Another one for some other ideas for enhancing self-esteem in others are treating others with respect. We've kind of started to cover that always. Expressing the caring and affection by saying things in kind and affirming ways. I know we've already talked about that, but encouraging people in their efforts. And it might be, over the course of the day, throughout the day, and doing it in an authentic and in an enthusiastic way. And also recognizing that you're a very important person in other people's lives. How you respond to them, how you listen, how you assert yourself, how you share your truth in honest and respectful ways matters. It matters to people, and that everyone has some right to some type of success and feeling good about what they're doing. So one of the things that might be helpful is just to talk a little bit more about how to handle criticism. Because what happens a lot of the time is we naturally, when we feel criticized, it activates our survival, our fight, flight, freeze mechanism that tells us danger, danger, danger. So sometimes if we can stay open and recognize that we're feeling criticized, it's going to be really important. And if we notice our stress response getting activated, which is generally the heart starts to pump, lots of blood goes to the large muscles of the body, pupils dilate, the ears get more kind of perked up, stomach and libido shut down. We don't need those things when we're trying to outrun the tiger. So it's just tuning in to go, oh, well, I'm feeling this right now. So rather than become defensive, be curious. Tell me more. What do you mean? Help me understand what you're saying. And so then when we ask these clarifying kinds of questions, it gives us a chance kind of internally to kind of catch our breath, slow down, and move more into more of a relaxed state and out of that stress response that sometimes can really get in the way of focus and concentration, because when we're feeling stressed or anxious, sometimes focus and concentration is decreased. If you don't agree with what someone has to say, really let the person know that you've heard what you've said. This is what I hear you saying, the mirroring technique, the paraphrasing. Before you move on to sharing your perspective, your point of view, or saying what you have to say in response, really let the person know that you've heard what they had to say. And also, maybe you're going to start to notice a pattern of constructive feedback. So maybe that's going to let you know, wow, this person's giving me this feedback, another person is giving me this feedback. I've been hearing this feedback over a period of time, or I've been hearing it since I was a kid. Maybe I want to pay attention to this. Maybe there's some learning in this for me that I want to pay attention to, because generally when we see those kinds of themes in our lives, it is an indication that there's something to consider and pay attention to. And sometimes when someone is being really highly self-critical, maybe you're going to set some limits and boundaries about how you're being treated. You don't have to continue to listen at that point. That's where our boundaries come in, where we say, I've heard what you have to say. I'm going to take a break right now and consider and move forward. A couple of other things when we're dealing with criticism is avoiding the personalizing, as we talked about earlier, as I was mentioning just a minute ago, paraphrasing, checking your perception, asking questions. Those are all keys to helping us kind of move through, not only through helping us understand, but helping us move through the stress response that sometimes gets activated when we're feeling criticized. And this next slide gives us a way to evaluate it. So this is kind of like locus of control. There's these boxes. So if you're going to look at, okay, if the criticism is valid and important, then you go to that box and it says, if it's valid and important, I'm going to acknowledge and I'm going to commit to some kind of action. Going across, if the criticism is valid and unimportant, I'm going to acknowledge it and I'm going to agree with the shrug. If the criticism is invalid and it's important, I'm going to acknowledge it and I'm going to empathize. If the criticism is invalid and it's unimportant, I'm going to acknowledge it and I'm going to agree with the explanation. And this is just kind of a locus of control is sort of what this whole box is all about. It's sort of looking at, you know, what are the things that are within my control and what are the things that aren't in my control. We can control how we respond to other people. We can't necessarily control how they're responding to us. So this gives us a way to be able to evaluate that. Expressing feelings openly and directly. This is really what assertiveness is all about. And there are ways to do it, as I've mentioned earlier, that can be positive and affirming. And it can mean just telling somebody how much I love and care and appreciate, or it might be, I really love and appreciate how you did X, Y, and Z. It really meant a lot to me when you did this. And there's ways that we can express. It's always important to express it to both genders. Sometimes, you know, we feel more hesitant about sharing it with someone who's an opposite gender, a gender expression than how we do. But we can never be too positive in expressing our affection to others. Expressing our feelings openly and directly. I know we've already been talking a lot about this, but let's just do some examples of what that might look like. So it might mean telling a friend about something that they've done that hurt your feelings, or something that you would like them to do differently in the future. You might be worried about hurting feelings. And maybe they have hurt your feelings and you want to let them know that they have. So that's you being the communicator when something's upsetting you about what someone's doing. Might mean telling a date you don't appreciate something they've done. It might mean expressing some resentment and irritation directly to someone. And when it comes to expressing our feelings directly, one of the things that we always want to do is there's sort of a three-part statement. And this isn't in the slide, I just want to tell you about it, because when we're expressing our feelings, it's really important to take responsibility for how we're feeling. So that would look something like, I feel, feeling in a feeling statement, I feel hurt because, and then explaining why. And then we move into what I would like is, so that's where we're asking for what it is that we would like directly or instead of. So some self-defeating beliefs when we're expressing our feelings. And these self-defeating beliefs are some of the old beliefs, the mental formations I was talking about when we first started. Some of the things that can get in the way of communicating assertively and directly. Some of the opposites of assertiveness are aggressiveness, which is when we're expressing our hostility or it comes out in angry and hostile ways, or there's acquiescence. Acquiescence is more of a passive, well, I'm kind of wondering if, or boy, I'm kind of beating around the bush and not really coming out and being direct about it. So some of the self-defeating beliefs that get in the way of people being able to express themselves in an assertive, respectful, and direct way are they worry about rejection. They worry about not being liked. If I speak up, maybe they're going to feel like I have to be nice to them forever. Maybe I can't do it directly because it's too hard, so I'll never be able to face. If I say something assertive and they don't like it, I won't be able to face them again. Maybe it'll affect the relationship, and maybe we won't have the same kind of connection or the relationship we've had in the past. And so these fears, they're all fears, really. They're kind of irrational belief systems or decisions we've made early on that get in the way, or sometimes they become excuses to not express ourselves when we're feeling scared and afraid and we don't have the courage. We sort of engage in these belief systems that get in the way, but they can become they can be excuses for not taking responsibility for ourselves, our lives, and what we're thinking and feeling. So just a few rules on feelings. Feelings matter. The fact that you have a feeling is enough. The fact that you feel it, it's your feeling. Nobody else has a right to judge it, criticize it, put you down for it. It is what you feel, and it's meant to be expressed. And as I was saying earlier and at the outset, That's one of the main reasons is that we assert ourselves, not just to see if we can, let somebody know how we think and feel, but it's so that we don't hold things inside, because as we stuff our feelings down, as we hold the feelings inside, eventually it can take a toll on us. Emotion is energy in motion. As we're able to express that emotion, we release it. It's kind of like a tantruming 2-year-old. They scream and yell and they tantrum and they're done with it, and next thing you know, they're moving right along and not giving a second thought to it. When we don't express ourselves, when we don't articulate our feelings, and if we hold it inside, it can come out as depression, anger, it can come out as physical health issues, relationship issues. You see it often in relationships where over time somebody holds it in, and then screams and yells at somebody over a simple minor thing. Well, the issue isn't that simple minor thing. It's because those feelings have built up over time, and then they're having their impact. Feelings are in the moment. They're here, they're right here, they're right now, they're present time. This too shall pass, as we were saying a little bit earlier. You don't have to defend them, you don't have to justify them. They're not right or wrong. And a lot of times what gets in the way for people is they judge and they criticize themselves for the feelings that they're having. So that's the first thing to check into with yourself with when you're doing your inquiry and your contemplation. Am I allowing myself to have these feelings, or am I judging myself for having them? When we allow ourselves to have our feelings, we get to know them more intimately. We listen to what they want us to know about ourselves and about the dynamic and the communication that we're in the midst of. It's very important. All righty. This is something I was mentioning a little bit ago, expressing feelings at the I level. So what that is that's the I statement, I feel. And a lot of times what people will tend to do is they'll say to somebody else, you make me feel so mad. Well, nobody makes us feel anything. That feeling comes from within us. So we have to take responsibility for it. I feel. That's what taking responsibility for it is when we say I feel rather than you make me feel. Notice that one for yourself, all righty? Expressing your feelings with body and soul. It's important not to give mixed messages, okay? And that would be when you're angry, you don't smile. That's a mixed message. It's very confusing when you're expressing anger towards someone and you do it with a smile. They're not clear. Or when you laugh when you're angry and you're trying to put it out there. A lot of times the reasons that we do that are because we're nervous and we're scared. And putting it out there feels difficult. We're not sure what the other person's reaction is going to be. And so we do it, and we don't even do it consciously a lot of the time. So that'll just be something to kind of be tuning into for yourself. All righty. So as you're moving into thinking about some of the ways to do all this, you hear a lot in the media these days about positivity and having a positive attitude. And while it might seem like kind of a buzzword, positivity or positive attitude, there's a lot to be said for it. The more we can focus on the positive, the more we see the positive. It's all in the field. It's all available to us. And when you think about the people that you most enjoy being around and connecting with, or in the workplace, who are the people that you most want to be in association with? People with a positive attitude are people that are open to possibilities. They're open to communicating. They're open to relating. They're open to connecting. And it's kind of like, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? You have to think about it's like a philosophy of life as well. If you don't have a positive attitude, try one on. Do the experiment. Find out maybe if it doesn't come as comfortable to you, but just try it on and see when I'm more positive or having a more open or positive attitude. What do I notice about the way people are relating to me and communicating with me? Are people seeking me out in new ways that maybe didn't before? Positive words are I can, I'm able. And we all like to sort of be around people that have a can-do attitude. It's maybe I don't know how, but I'm sure going to give it a good shot and try. You know, a lot of this, when you talk about a positive attitude, it really starts with our own positive self-talk. What are the judgments and the messages that we're having toward ourselves? The more self-judgment that we have, the more judgment we're going to have of others. So really the place to start when we talk about having a positive attitude is to look at what our self-talk is. What are we saying to ourselves about ourselves? I mean, are we saying I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not intelligent enough, I'm not capable enough, I can never get this? That's the kind of self-talk that can really drag a person down. And really, the gift that we can give ourselves is we don't necessarily have to make ourselves stop thinking a certain way. We can just begin by paying attention to how it is that we are thinking, how we are judging ourselves. And oftentimes, just the act of observing alone the way we're talking to ourselves and maybe some of the judgments that we have begins to shift it, because we're bringing attention to it. We're shining a light on it. We're bringing it out of the dark so that we can see it for ourselves. Some other aspects of positive attitude, it might mean remembering to compliment your coworkers, telling them things that you like and appreciate them. A lot of times what people will tend to do is they'll comment on appearance. Oh, I really like the clothes you're wearing, or, we tend to be good at giving compliments that are appearance oriented, but it might mean, hey, I really liked it, when you got that report to me on time. I really liked it when you helped me out, or when you jumped in and kind of shared your ideas on working on that project. I really like it when you get that report in on time, because I'm counting on you in order to be able to get my report done. There are so many opportunities to compliment our coworkers and the people in our lives. And part of it is just remembering to do it, taking that time out and remembering how much everybody likes it. And, another one is smiling for no reason at all. A lot of the research is showing these days that just the act of smiling alone and turning one's mouth up into a smile releases the happy hormones. And certainly in the workplace with family, friends, intimate partners, certainly when we've got a smile on our face, it certainly sends a different message about our openness to listen, be available, to hear, to be receptive, than if we're walking around with a frown. So one of the ways that we can tend to characterize these things are, it's either optimism or pessimism. Do you tend toward more of an optimistic attitude, or do you tend to tend more toward pessimism? And they tend to be kind of views of life. The glass is half full or the glass is half empty. And what I've noticed is that oftentimes optimism and pessimism are kind of styles of relating and styles of viewing the world. And I've sometimes in working with clients, I've had to walk, because I tend to be an optimistic person, and sometimes my optimism is by people that have a pessimistic view of life. They can't really relate to it sometimes, and it doesn't make them bad, wrong, awful. It just means that they have more of that kind of a life view and that viewpoint framework of life. So sometimes that can be helpful to take a look at what would be more mine. Do I tend toward optimism? Do I tend to look at, maybe this didn't go so well, but it can go better in the future, whereas pessimism would go, that went really horrible, it's going to go horrible again if I do it again. So and sometimes when you're optimistic, though, you can show people another way of doing it. That's optimism would be more when things are going well, you credit the hard work. When things are going bad, it might be that you're blaming outside sources. With optimism, we're healthier. People that are optimistic, and this is a lot of what the research is showing, people that are optimistic tend to be healthier, they live longer, they are happier in their careers, and they tend to score higher on aptitude tests. People that are pessimistic, when things are going well, they attribute that things are going well to luck. Whereas I was saying earlier, the person that's optimistic views that things are going well because of my contributions and because of my hard work. So with the pessimist, there, when you can't count on your hard work getting you somewhere, and it's all based on luck, it makes life very unpredictable. If you can't know that your hard work and effort is going to kind of pay off, and everything in life is sort of based on luck, you're sort of, at the randomness of life. Pessimists also have a lot of self-judgment when things are not going well. They have a lot of self-blame and self-judgment, and they tend to have a more weakened immune system. And that's sort of true in general for anybody who has a lot of self-judgment, because what happens with self-judgment is it's something that constant kind of mental formations around not good enough, feelings of inadequacy, I never am good enough for other people's approval, it activates the stress response. And whenever the stress response gets activated, we're dumping all this adrenaline and cortisol into the system, because that's what's telling the body that it needs to outrun the tiger. It's in danger, danger, danger. If we have too much cortisol and adrenaline built up in our system over a long period of time, it begins to impact the immune system. The immune system then has to come in and clean up all that adrenaline and all that cortisol, and it's not designed for that. It's designed to come in and clean up natural bacteria and other kinds of invaders. So our immune system gets compromised, and that's how we get sick. All righty. So let's talk a little bit about this theory of self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm sure you've heard this before, so I'm going to kind of reiterate it now. The more you expect from a situation, the more you'll get. And it's kind of like you hear this in school settings too. When teachers hold children to a certain standard and believe in the possibility and the capability of what they can do, they rise to the challenge. They rise to the occasion. And I've seen this happen a lot. All right. The other one is that in terms of the theory of self-fulfilling prophecy is other people act in ways that are consistent with our expectations. So if we believe that people are capable of certain things, we then start to notice it. Because we're looking for it, we see it. It's just like I was saying earlier. It's all in the field. And as we look for it, we see it, and then it becomes obvious to us. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some signs that things that would indicate to you that you're unhappy at work. That's sort of this next part of our presentation. So how do you know? Have you stopped to take the time to self-reflect? What is it that's going on that's helping you maybe sort of think that maybe something is up that's letting you know you're unhappy? And is it about your work situation, or is it about something else? But specifically some signs about unhappiness at work. You notice you're having a hard time getting up in the morning. The alarm goes off and you press the snooze button 3 times and you get out of bed and you're rushing to get to work, and then you're often late. A lot of times when people are unhappy with their job, they're sick more often. And that has to do with the unhappiness and sort of the drudgery and the sort of the dreariness that one feels about their life and their job because they're unhappy there. You might notice you're having more conflict in your relationships with your spouse, your intimate partner, with your children. You might have less patience. You just have more conflict in general. It might be conflict with your coworkers. It might mean that anybody that you're in a close connection with, or even less connected with, you'll notice the impatience, the anger, the shortness, and just kind of you're kind of walking around with a chip on your shoulder or kind of an edge. Another thing that happens in work settings when people that really don't want to be there is that they tend to make more mistakes. It's because they're not present time focused. They're not tuned in. They're not checked in. They're not bringing all of themselves to the job. They're distracted. They're unhappy about it. And sometimes they're tuning into other things or not really paying attention to their job assignments or tasks and their duties. Another thing that happens for people when they're unhappy, whether it's with their job or, other kinds of circumstances in their life, is that they engage in self-destructive behaviors. It might be addictions, it might be under or overeating, it might be drinking or drugging to excess, it might be shopping, it might be internet, it might be pornography, it might be gambling, anything that we do that's really sort of a distraction or a coping mechanism. And generally, anytime that a person is participating in some kind of an addictive behavior, that it's really because it's a search for happiness and searching for fulfillment in a substance or a source that really can't feel it, but it can take that edge off temporarily. So how do we do it? How do we handle it when we're feeling unhappy at work? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can focus on the positive aspects of the job, because this is sort of based on the idea that just because I'm feeling some unhappiness here, maybe I'm not ready to make a change. Maybe I've made a life decision that I want to stay with this organization and retire here. So if I'm going to be here, how am I going to be able to be here and change the way I'm reacting and responding to it? Because that's how, as I was mentioning earlier, we get sick. If we continue to be unhappy and stay in a situation where we're unhappy and we don't take responsibility for our feelings, then that's going to impact us. So what can we do? We can take some active steps. We can focus on what it is that we like about the job. It might be the money. It might be some of the friendships. It may be certain aspects or the duties that we can get into that we can enjoy. View work as a factual aspect. That's just really, hey, my job is my job. I do this job because it provides me with an income that allows me to be able to pay for a home and a car, or, whatever it is that you've identified as your basic needs for yourself. What also really helps is when we stay focused on what's working and not what's not working. Because the truth of it is in every situation there are things that are working. The solution to a problem is in looking at what's working. The solution to a problem is in what doesn't work. And so when we look at what's working in the work environment, that helps us sort of strategize about what we might want to be able to focus more on or build more into our job. Really avoiding judgments, criticisms, opinions, because what we tend to do with that is that we drag ourselves down. And like in any situation where we're having a challenging situation, find humor. Where's the humor in this situation? Are there some things I can still smile and laugh about in the midst of it all? Again, we have a choice. We make a choice about how we assert ourselves in our relationships. We make a choice about how we think and respond. We make a choice, are we going to be optimistic or pessimistic? Are we going to believe in self-fulfilling prophecy? We make these choices all the time. And that's something that's within your, as I was talking earlier about locus of control, really looking at, do I take responsibility or do I put that on other people? Thinking positively. I know, here's this positivity word, is positively now. Looking at, establishing some realistic expectations. If you're noticing that you're sort of struggling with that, or even if you're noticing as I'm talking about it right now, oh gosh, there's that word again, or, yeah, a lot easier to say than it is to do. Whatever, rebuttal you might notice going on now, notice that. Potentially that's one of the roadblocks that's getting in the way for you. And then begin to develop some strategies. I mean, some people maybe will write out some positive affirmations or I statements. What I like and appreciate is, or I like and appreciate this aspect or quality. Developing some strategies for it. Identifying, of course, always worst case scenarios, so we have kind of some ways of being able to responding. Setting higher expectations. Maybe as you're attending this training and you're hearing about some of these ideas, maybe you're going to ask yourself to say, or you're going to commit to yourself to pay a little more attention to maybe some of the kinds of statements or the mental formations that can get in the way and drag you down. And maybe look at, are some of these, belief systems that really work for me now, or is it just old thinking? And there's 3 questions that I pose to you that help with this. It's to ask yourself, is this true? How did I decide this? And who said so? That can help us really get at some of these kinds of things. Focus on your successes and looking at the negative thoughts. And that's what I was saying just a minute ago. One of the ways, this statement says to avoid negative thoughts. I don't know that we're really, the mind is the mind, and the mind does what the mind does. The best that we can really do is we can't control it, we can shine the light on it, and we can challenge it and question it by saying, as I said a minute ago, is this thought, this negative thought, is it really true? And how did I decide this thought? And who said so? And oftentimes it's, somebody said something early on in our life that has just kind of stuck with us. All right, a couple of other things. Sometimes we just have to fake it till we make it. Sometimes it's dress and act the part. It's take action. It helps when we can maintain a balanced life. Sometimes looking to the future can be really helpful. It's helpful to avoid all or nothing thinking. That should, must, have to, all those kinds of kind of extreme views. It also helps if we can protect ourselves from personal rejection, from our own self-judgment and the way we judge ourselves. And avoiding mind reading can be really helpful. Check it out. When in doubt, check it out. Okay, what happens when we're working with non-team players? Okay, this can be challenging for all of us, and I'm going to kind of move through this because I know we're getting toward our end. What we can do is we can be complimentary. We can compliment people on what we like and appreciate about their contributions. Maybe we're going to have lunch. Maybe we're just going to be a light in somebody else's pathway where we maintain our positive attitude. And the truth of it is that as you share that, it does rub off on others. And just be aware, be conscious of the people in your environment that have that kind of impact, and you might make some choices about how much time you want to spend around them. As you look at your attitude toward others, bring some understanding to it. As we feel good about ourselves, we can bring some of that to other people. Sometimes people are having a rough time. A lot of times you don't know. It's like the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg, you see some of what's going on, but not very much. A lot of times there's a lot below the surface that you can't even see. So when we can be cooperative others, when we can accept others for who they are, sort of like in the 12-step movement with the Serenity Prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Let your enthusiasm show. That's how we shine our light, is by showing our enthusiasm. Sometimes it's helpful for people when they have a goal for each day to write 3 things down at the end of your workday that you did well, taking that moment out to self-reflect. Again, the solution to a problem isn't in what's going wrong, it's in what's going right. Maybe focusing on that. Maybe you're just going to acknowledge yourself. Hey, good job, way to go. Maybe you're going to remind yourself, okay, now you get to take time out, relax, slow down, have some fun, and enjoy some free time. Because a lot of times people don't give themselves permission to take time out, have some fun. So make sure you give yourself permission for that. So how do you make your job fun? And that might be by merging in some things into the job that you really do enjoy doing. Bringing some balance to the job to help you feel more successful in both your personal and your work life. If you have too much focus on work and not enough personal time, too much work makes for a very dull day and an out-of-balance life for so many of your connections and relationships. People who have activities and passions outside of work are a lot healthier people, as we were talking about earlier as well. So think about, what do you enjoy? What do you like doing? Think about, what do you like to do that isn't a should, must, or a have to? So maybe you say, I like to exercise, but that feels like a have to. Well, maybe that's a really good thing you're doing for yourself, and I encourage you to do more of it. But we also need to make sure we're fitting in things that we really find pleasurable as well. Make your job more fun. Maybe there's a way to bring music to it. Maybe music, song, dance. If there's a way to weave that in. Some of the creative arts, finding ways to bring our creativity, because in our creativity, in all of us, we all have a creative side to us, and we can bring that creativity. There's a lot of energy in our creativity. Another way that we can really get engaged and have more fun is to develop relationships with our coworkers. I mean, we can learn so much from each other, and it makes work a lot more fun when we're engaged, when we're maybe sharing a funny story, a funny joke, and relating to what we can really relate to, sort of teasing one another. It can make the job a lot more fun. Enjoying your free time, making sure you accentuate the positive. Maybe you're going to have things in the work environment, kudos, sending around little notes of appreciation, having bulletin boards, sharing with one another, acknowledgments and accomplishments, and just whenever possible, verbalizing those positive experiences. And I know we're coming to the top of our hour, so just a quick reminder, just remember to laugh at yourself, and it can make you feel better, and it's contagious. And of course, if you want any support with any of this, or just want to think out loud and talk with one of our counselors, you've got your EAP benefits. Check out our website and give us a call if we can support you further with this in any way in the future. And here's wishing you all the very best in what you might take from here and move forward with in the next days ahead. Take care.